Okay.
So from now, we should pay attention to everything we say. It's public.
Exactly.
Oh, and
We are live.
I just lighted a cigarette.
We're live, but we are alone. So
Which I always do before a session. And after.
Well,
yeah.
let's hope you will not need one after.
It's just a habit.
It's a habit, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess so. Let's see now. I want to test drive
my colleague
everything
is
on
on.
mobile. Would you have a problem to publish that later in the YouTube channel?
No, not at all.
Oh, no, not at all.
Because there are already questions in the platform in meetup.com about if this is going to be live. People like it. So
We are evangelists, the highest following we get and the happiest we are.
yeah.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
The more souls, the better. Yep.
Yeah.
I'm obliged to ask though. I mean,
Yeah, no, of course. That's true.
Just
But, no, we don't have a problem.
GDPR safe side, you know.
Yes.
Wait, I have my.
So I'm almost ready to double check everything, and then I was planning to just make an intro that we will wait 1 or 2 minutes more because it's quite common. People are a bit late, you know, it's never 6 o'clock exactly.
Or you can do it just informally, like because in other user groups, like people would just join in the middle of a conversation.
Yeah, actually, they just shared it already. people hear us now. I need to remember that.
But wait, there are 4 attendees, so we don't see them as participants, or is it?
No.
Oh, you didn't create a. So you created a webinar, right?
Yes.
In Teams, not a meeting.
Not a live event.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, because when you create a meeting, so people are just like peer to peer, but it makes things a bit more like informal.
Yeah, but I mean, I tried that, but
yeah.
How are you able to share the link then? I mean, I couldn't find a way to actually share the link for the event. People had to be parts of the Munich.com Teams.
No, like the last time I've done that, it was in Sheffield, in UK, and I think they used Teams, and there was just a link to the invite link to the meeting for external members.
I actually started using Teams after I became MVP, and all this came for free. But maybe I missed that because this is one of the things that I didn't like about Teams, that with Zoom, it was more personal, right? You had the chance of interacting and maybe even people were asking.
But the thing is not to create a webinar, but you create a meeting, I guess, actually. I've never done a webinar on Teams. And then people join and, well, they are self-disciplined anyway, so they will unmute themselves. And
yeah,
I think when you're doing a webinar, you have control over, you know, what the attendees. Like webinar is a bit like you have the heroes and you have the herds, but for a user group, it's probably better to be all at the same level. But it depends.
Yeah, definitely.
Like how many people you have. If you have 80, it's a lot. But if you have 10, 15, 20.
Let's see. I will definitely try it. There are some events that, of course, there are many more. But I will definitely try. To be honest, I didn't even know that you can share a simple Teams meeting as a, you know, with a link and everything. But I will try it.
Yeah.
I think I will put myself out there. I hope people can hear me. And it's 30 already. We can wait a few more minutes. I can add me, and then I can send live, and then at least I am live.
Yes.
Okay, and we also record this, which is cool. I double check that, and we will have a recording. The first, of course, what we are discussing right now, I will remove it. I will crop it. We'll keep the essence out of it.
I'll just put the tie now, and it starts to be official. I do it.
Check that, and we'll have a recording. Okay. I think we can, yeah, we can slowly start. I mean, it will take a few minutes anyway for my intro, and then you can start. Don, you going first then, right? And
Yes.
yeah. Perfect then. So I know whoever was already online. You can hear us talking here with Don and Gail. It's an interesting event today that it's starting. Let me just move a bit forward. I know that this is a weird screen to see for web teams because you don't actually have, for a webinar, you don't actually have a lot of interaction. But then again, GDPR, blah, blah, blah. I'm obliged to say that I'm recording this, and yeah, I plan to publish it in YouTube after all. So this is me. I'm George. You can find me in almost all social media, including, of course, GitHub. You can see my account. It seems that I find out through time that my name and surname is not very easy for people to remember, and thus I created this QR code that you can see here. I think I have a bit bigger one here. Yeah. If you want to find me, there is a simple page which includes all my social links, including GitHub, my blog, blah, blah, blah. Just take a photo of this one and you will reach me. Now, what we have today is a very, very interesting event, and we can see that from the participation, right? There are many people that joined the event. So why and how DI can improve the quality of your software. Don will do this. He's a technical evangelist for DEVEXPRESS. He's done that a few times already, and I'm sure you will enjoy the event. But after this, there is also a surprise, like 10 minutes in the end. An old friend, Gail, he was with us, if I remember correctly, with another event, Logging is Hot Again. It was in October 2019. Yeah, I think that was a live event, right?
Yeah, I was there in person, and it was fun. A lot of people.
It was a really cool event, to be honest. It was also hosted in JetBrains. Yeah, it was very nice. All times before Corona, right?
Exactly. That was my last speaking tour before Corona.
Yeah. It was your last one.
This was my last. Also the last, yeah.
Okay. That would be then. We should arrange it and have that a live event, because that might be your first. It could be your first live. Maybe we can arrange that.
Yeah.
So after Don is done, we have, as I said, Gail with us for a very, very interesting topic. For those that you can't remember, Gail, you weren't part of that event back then. Gail is the founder and president of PostSARPS Technologies, and he will show you how dependency injection works with MetaLlama. This is a new Roslyn-based metaprogramming framework. In order, you could use it to reduce boilerplate and architecture erosion, which just by the terminology used, you can imagine how interesting this thing is. So, two events in one bigger one with Don, and a very interesting ending with Gail. I think I am done speaking. I can, Gail, I will stop sharing my screen now, and you can start sharing yours, of course, and I can also share you with the world.
Yes, thank you, and I think we'll give it a go here. Well, thank you for joining, and yeah, as already announced, we're going to talk about dependency injection and yeah, how does that work? How we can apply that in our software, and why should we apply that in our software? And yeah, I have a couple of slides to give a bit of an introduction, and then we'll see in Visual Studio how we can use dependency injection. So let's start. So yeah, as mentioned, what is dependency injection? Well, dependency injection is a design pattern which enables us to loosely couple different objects in our application. And yeah, it separates the creation of dependencies from the behavior of an object. And I mean, this sounds all a bit abstract, but it will make sense in a couple of minutes. Well, yeah, let's make this have some sense right now by starting with a practical example. And for all of you that are already a bit familiar with dependency injection, in my next image there is a bit of a thing, but we won't mention that. It's about the general idea on how this works. So let's take a look at something in real world which wouldn't use dependency injection. We have this desk light, and this desk light has a button integrated in its foot where you can turn the light on or off. And as I mentioned before, maybe some people think, yeah, but what about the power plug and the power outlet, etc., etc. Let's just focus on this particular example here. So this would be done with by not using dependency injection. If we would take the same example and have a look on how this would work with dependency injection, what we'll have is a little shop. I'll get to the shop a bit later. We have a light and we have a bunch of wires, and they come from the light into the switch, and I can just turn on the switch and the light goes on. But what you also see here is that by using dependency injection, there is this connection between the switch and the lamp. But I could also pull up a second lamp and connect it to that same switch. And the only thing I need to do is get another lamp and connect it to the switch. Maybe I want to use like another lamp somewhere else in my house. So I want to have a square lamp instead of a round one. And still, I don't need to do anything on the former lights, and I also don't need to do anything on the switch. I just need to connect the lamp to the switch, and it will just do the exact same thing. And the store is obviously where you get that stuff, right? So I could eventually go to the store and say, give me another switch, because I don't like that other thing. I want to have a fancy, nice looking switch. The only thing I need to do is get that old switch out, put a new good looking switch in, and voila, we have upgraded our system, so to say, without too much effort. And this is, in a nutshell, what dependency injection is all about. And let me be clear, dependency injection is a design pattern. So that means that it doesn't only exist for .NET, but there are lots of other frameworks that use dependency injection. Even JavaScript frameworks like Vue, Angular, etc. So why would we use that? Well, if you saw the image or the little slide that I gave with the lamps and the switch, yeah, it's quite flexible. And so you can actually reuse classes and objects across different parts of the application, or even several applications. And obviously a very cool thing is that different portions of an application can be developed independently and in parallel. So suppose you have this front-end team and you have a back-end team, and the back-end team is developing this really complex service, but that particular service is not operational yet because they're still building on it. But the front-end developer needs something to work with so that he can finish off the UI. So what he can do is create a mock-up service, a static service, or with some sample data in it, or some sample functionality, and he can still continue on his thing while the other team is doing its own thing. And in the end, they can replace that dependency with the real one. Yeah, so that's obviously a very powerful thing here. And yeah, another thing which is quite cool to have is that you would be able to unit test portions of your code to improve the quality of your applications. As I mentioned, it is a design pattern, so it's available on many platforms, but there are, with dependency injection, a couple of minimum components that you will need to actually apply this design pattern in your application. We first have the container, or in some frameworks it's called the injector, which will actually inject certain functionality in your code. And then we have a bunch of services that will actually be injected somewhere with the specific functionality that you'll need. And then you have a client, and that would actually be your code. And suppose you have this component, this UI component, and you need like some data access. You can inject a data access object into your component, and then your component would become the client from the dependency injection. How does that work with ASP.NET Core, or, well, basically .NET 6? There are a couple of levels of service lifetime, and I think before we actually go any further, it will probably make sense to give you a tiny little example on how this would actually work in code. And then I will go over these 3 levels of service lifetime and a couple of other things here. So let's start by switching over to Visual Studio. And what I've done, let me see, yeah, where is it? It just showed up and then it went off. Yes, I have created a small, I think it's a web Razor page application. And what it does, it doesn't do a lot because it is actually just the starter project being finished. And what we'll have here is a web page which says welcome and a bunch of other stuff, and that's pretty much it. So what we can do now is we can create a service, and that's exactly what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to create a string modifier service. This is a piece of software that, or yeah, it's some software that I want to reuse all over the place. And it is able to transform text to be precisely this. So how can we do this? Well, I've set up in this project. This is not really rocket science. I mean, it's just a home controller with a bunch of things here and there. And I haven't done really a lot of things about it. The only thing that I did is I've created a code folder. I have created a services file. And what I've done here, let me put that one away. What I've done here, I have created an upper class service. That upper class service is implementing this string modifier service. And this string modifier service only has one method, which is modify. So I obviously need to implement this, and the modify in this case does a toUpper invariant. Right, so not really exciting, but it is more to give you a very clear idea on how this works. Now I want to use this functionality inside this service. I want to use this in my home controller. And this is where we could actually use dependency injection. So this welcome text is being put in the view data. And if I go to the index, what you'll see is that it will be inserted here, which will result in this particular text, right? So let's use some dependency injection, and this immediately brings us to the first bullet of the slide. Shouldn't be switching and talking at the same time. Let me see. Yeah, so I've created this code, but now I need to register this service to the dependency injection system. So the dependency injection system knows where to get certain functionality. How do we do that? Well, for that, I will need to go back to my slide, because that is actually the second bullet. We have, as mentioned, 3 levels of service lifetime. The initialization and registration of services is done in the startup configure services, or if you're using .NET 6, they have this program.cs file, which just has a bunch of lines of code in there, but that's the place where you should be. So either the startup configure services or the program.cs file. And if I would go to the program.cs file here, since this is a .NET 6 application, created with the new project template, you see already that the builder, my application builder, has a services collection. And this is exactly what we need, because we need to register something here as well. So what I can do is I can say builder.services, and this brings us actually to the first bullet of the slide. I can now say add transient. Is one of the life cycles of a service. I'll get back to that a bit later, but I'll first show you a bit of code here. The registration of those services are type-based. That is an important thing. And in this case, it's going to be a iString modifier service. This is the type that is being returned, but the actual implementation type is my uppercase service. And so this is a bit of a best practice here to use an interface type as the returning type, and this is the actual implementation type. Once I go back to the home controller, I can inject this in various ways. And I will show you a couple of other ways as well, but I'm going to use the most used injection mechanism to start with. What I can do now is in this home controller constructor, I can add a parameter, which is the iString modifier service. And what I can do then is declare a field, put it here, and I have it in my controller. And next, I can say string modifier service modify. So what you see here are a couple of things. The first thing is like this home controller doesn't normally have any parameters in the constructor, but now it does. And what this means is that once at runtime, this controller will be created, or an instance of this home controller will be instantiated by the runtime. It will check the parameters of the constructor, and it will see a number of parameters here. What it will do now, the runtime at least, it will check whether there is something registered in the dependency injection system. Now remember this one. And if so, it's going to create an instance of this object and return it and pass it in this variable. And with this, I'm just setting a property here in my controller, or like a private member, and I now have access through the entire scope of my home controller through this particular service. If I run the application, it is probably quite clear what's going to happen. It's going to be put in uppercase because that was exactly what my string transformer service was doing. And this also shows how powerful dependency injection is, because what I can also do, if I switch back to Visual Studio, and let me quickly create a lower class one. I'm going to do this. Just going to put this in here. In this case, I will rename this one to lowercase. Implement the same interface. And in this case, I'll do it like this. So I've created this new service. There's a whole bunch of code. I've been working for weeks on this because it was super duper complex. And now I want to test it. Well, how can I do that? I can just go here. I only need to change this. And if I will now run the application, it will be obvious what's going to happen because that uppercase service is not registered anymore. And if I check my browser, you'll see it's all lowercase. And so this is a very simple example on how to set up and how to use dependency injection. I'd like to stick up with my slides, so let's quickly head back here. So now you have seen me initialize or register some service here. What I also mentioned is that the registration is type-based. Yeah, and you saw that by me returning some interface type, but the actual implementation type was something different, but it is all type-based. It also means that it's very important to understand that at this stage, nothing, when the code is executed, and we'll start on this line, it continues to this one, and it continues to this one. At this stage, no instance of the lowercase service has been created yet. This is an important aspect. It is just a registration. See this as a bit of like a dictionary, which has like a type, the iString modifier service, and it's got the actual type, the lowercase service. So you're just adding something to the list, basically, under the hood of the dependency injection. Right, so nothing has been done yet. The last thing here is most DI services, particularly the services that come with .NET, because in the .NET library, there is like a whole bunch of services that can be used. And for most of them, they have extension methods for easy and clean registration. And you already saw that because if we check out this one, for instance, this is done by .NET itself, and it adds the controllers with views. And if you would check out this code, you can actually check that out on Git. You'll see that there's a whole bunch of services being registered, there's a whole bunch of configuration being done, and this is all being done by just saying add controllers with views, and all the functionality needed is put in there. Same goes for entity framework. You can just say build.services.configure entity framework, and a whole bunch of stuff is being done. And with that, you can actually use entity framework for database access as well. And so this is yeah, nice. And if you set up services for yourself, you should actually consider creating these extension methods as well to make your startup code a bit clean and stuff. I should actually change that order of the bullets in my slideshow, because now I'm going to talk about those life cycles. And as I mentioned, this is just a registration. So if you would request this page, you might think, yeah, but where is this thing coming from? And how is it being created, or how does that work? Well, that is the magic of dependency injection. I mentioned here, I'm going to use the transient, and this also brings us to the next slide. The next slide is giving you a couple of service lifetimes. I have been using the transient one, that will be the last on these bullets. But the first service lifetime is a singleton. And probably some of you might remember when we didn't have dependency injection for .NET, that you would have like a singleton, a static singleton construct, to have like this particular class that would only be created once when the application ran. Well, a singleton lifetime is pretty much the same. The dependency injection will not only create those types, but it will also keep track of the objects being created and if a new object needs to be created. So if you register this service as a singleton, the first injection will create that instance, but that instance will not be freed when that code has been finished. No, it will be in memory for the remainder of the application. So this is way easier to set up as the singleton static constructs from the past, which were actually, yeah, prone to create errors. The second lifetime that we have is a scoped one. And how does this work? Well, a scoped one, there are a couple of different ways to look at that, and that depends a bit on the application that you're building. So the scoped instance means that if we take a look at like the Razor page application that we have in our demo, there is like a whole bunch of things going on before that page is actually being served. Yeah, so there might be some filters in between, some redirection, some routing, and a whole bunch of things are in the pipeline before that page is actually being returned. In all those processes, you can use dependency injection. So if you have like a whole bunch of things going on before in that pipeline, the first one that needs that service will actually get a new instance. And the next event or the next thing going on in the pipeline will use that same instance. And so on and so on and so on. Once the page has been returned, that service will be disposed. You don't need to take care of that. But this was with a Razor web page. If you would take a look at, for instance, a Blazor application, because dependency injection works there seriously well as well, with Blazor, it's a bit of a different thing, because a scoped instance, that would mean on Blazor WebAssembly, it would mean that it will be the same as a singleton, basically. So there will be one instance created from that particular service for the lifetime of the application. With Blazor, Blazor server, that's another case. Blazor server will create one instance for every client, basically. So you could also say that the scoped on Blazor WebAssembly is the same as singleton on WebAssembly, while singleton on Blazor server has a complete different meaning because everybody is using that same thing. Yeah? Then the last lifetime is a transient one. And a transient one is the one that I've been using in my little example. That means that whenever some service needs to be injected somewhere, it's always going to be a new one. And the transient one is typically used for like smaller services and yeah, things that need to be initialized quite quickly. Yeah? And if you don't want to hand over certain state information, which is another thing where you can use dependency injection for, to generate some state on one end, put it in that service, and then you'll be sure that it will go on depending on the service lifetime. Services can also be dependent on each other. So you can have a service that will be injected by another in another service. But for that, there is one remark that we have to make, and that is that a component or service cannot depend on other services with smaller lifetimes than their own. So if I would have this singleton service and I need some transient service being injected in there, that won't work. And you will actually get a nice error. We'll take a look at the errors in a minute. And so this is a very important aspect. So let's take a look in some code to see how all of this pretty much works. And this also brings us in a number of scenarios about injection. You've already seen me use one type of injection, which is called the constructor injection. And this is something which is used quite a bit and is also quite easy to do. Just have a constructor, put a bunch of services in that you want to have injected, because yes, you can have several services, and we'll take a look at that as well. And let that thing do its work, and you will be fine. And this constructor injection works for pretty much all objects or classes that are being instantiated at runtime. So like a controller or yeah, all those kind of things, like a tag helper, even a view component, and even an MVC filter. And to give you an example about that, I have already commented out that code, which I prepared. I have in my controller, I have an attribute put in type filter, which is of this particular type. If I go through that code, it doesn't really do a lot, but I can have the string modifier be injected here, and it will still work. So everything which is instantiated at runtime pretty much supports dependency injection in the constructor. Well, this is all very nice, but you always have to consider how much it takes to do certain things. And I'm not talking about like the weight or whatever, but I'm talking about clock cycles, initialization, etc. How long does it take? Very important. So suppose this string modifier service is actually connecting through some really old backend system, and it needs to get some data from there, and it takes like a couple of seconds before it's actually instantiated because of all different aspects. And the only thing where we would need this string modifier service is in the index. But what happens in the current scenario, if somebody is requesting this privacy page or this privacy view, it will still take a couple of seconds because this thing to be created takes time. So that will be a bit of a waste because we are just wanna have this view, and we are not dealing with the string modifier surface. So this brings us to another type of injection, which in this particular scenario might be more appropriate, and that is called method parameter injection. So how does this work? Well, let's get this out of the way, and I'm going to go to the index action method. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say from surfaces, I'm going to put in an attribute here. And now I'm going to add a parameter, which is the iString modifier surface. I will short name this with SVC. So I'm just putting in a parameter in this method, but I'm decorating it with the from surfaces attribute. This parameter it is. So what I can do now is SVC. I should remove that little thing here. And this will actually do the same with the exception that that surface is not globally inside the home controller anymore, but it will be just injected only when this index method will be called. So this is, in certain scenarios, this can improve the performance of your application. And yeah, this is typically something to consider with huge services that need to be created. One of the other things that you can do is a bit, yeah, sometimes it's not possible because obviously constructor injection, that's all very nice, but yeah, there could be classes where you can't add like a whole bunch of parameters because that's from a base class, or there's like a whole class hierarchy behind it, which doesn't allow you to put those constructor parameters in there. Another thing that you could actually do is use property injection. I do have to say I would use that with care, because then, yeah, things might get a bit weird. It could have some side effects when testing, and that kind of stuff, but it is certainly possible. How does this work? Well, I can add a property. Let me do that with modifier surface, and I'm gonna call this string modifier surface as well, and I will decorate this. Why is this not anything? Yeah. So this is another way of injecting, and what actually happens here is at runtime, when this home controller is instantiated, the runtime or the DI container will check whether there are properties with the inject attribute on top of it, and it will try to resolve that surface and bind it to that particular property. This is something which is recently introduced actually, and yeah, this is typically another way of doing it. This does bring you to the same approach. You have to be careful about how long it takes, because if this is the same big surface that takes like seconds to boot up basically, and you only need it here, don't use it, because you're better off using it in this particular way. And you can actually still, by the way, in the index method, if you are gonna do a post, this is a web page, you can still add other parameters here as well with the from body, or I don't know, whatever. Now you can still use these constructs behind it, because the runtime will actually check the attributes on the parameters, and yeah, that would be like a string or something. So this will still work. So let's and oh yeah, and the last thing, the last type of injection, which is also quite convenient, is a razor view injection. Let me comment these ones out, and I can leave that as it is. And the razor view injection is also to be used in Blazor as well, obviously. How does that work? Well, let me copy this one. I go to the view. And I can start this with the add inject. And let me call this slightly different. And now what I can do is I can go to this particular view data and say my SVC modify. I have to cast this to a string, I guess. And so with this in place, I don't even need to do anything in constructor injection or parameter injection or whatever. I mean, if it is just a simple thing, I can use this approach as well. So this will be injected. If your type can't be found, you obviously have to add it, which I already did. You have to put it here. So another type of injection. So let's see. Let's do something else. I'm going back to the services and play a bit around with the code. There is obviously one thing which is a bit which is interesting to point out here. I have created another class which is the reverser service. If I expand it, I prepped it already, and this also implements the string modifier service. And in this case, I have taken a quick look, and this code seems to be the shortest to reverse that string. I on purpose made this private because we're going to do a bit of another thing here. And the modifier will just do it. So now the only thing that I would need to do is in the program, I will this line in, and I will now do it to the string reverser service, right? And well, with this in place, you can probably imagine what's going on here. Here it is, and let's see. Oh, it didn't change this one, but it did change the one on my tab. You see that? Why is that? I thought I changed it in the code as well. Let's have a quick check. Huh. All right, well, it should actually do that as well. I'm not sure why it didn't do this one. But anyway, yeah, one of the things that I would like to do is let's go, because I want to have a reverser service as well. And that actually does the same twice. So what it actually does is I want to use functionality from this service in that reverser service. So let's see if I create a service which I call reverser service. And this is obviously just to give you an impression on how to on how this all works. I string modifier service. And in this case, I will need to implement the interface. Let's do that. And now I can pretty much yeah, the most easy way to do is use constructor injection here. And yeah, let's do it like this. And now I can declare this here. Well, let me rename that as well to make it a bit shorter. svc.modify, so this is the original one. And svc modify. In this particular case, I am actually I'm calling the reverse twice. So the result will be input, but this is just to show you how you can have this done by using another service. Yeah, so with this in place, I can switch this one over this. But this brings us to an interesting topic. What's here? Let me close down this and quickly stop by something is being used by another process. Not again. Let's try it again. That is only too bad. Let me quickly restart my Visual Studio. I have no idea why this thing is not working the way I wanted it to work. But
You know Murphy, right? It's always
sorry?
your presentations.
Oh, yeah. This always happens, but yeah, we'll have a quick break up here and see if this is running again. It can still not copy. Because it is used by another process. That is quite weird. I'm pretty sure. Sorry?
Maybe we can try checking the task manager and actually kill the process.
That is what I'm gonna do. If only I knew where that. Give me once. That doesn't work. Where is the task manager in Windows 11?
No, right click in the taskbar.
Yeah.
And then
I did that.
It's Windows you have there, or?
No, this is Windows 11.
So.
Yeah, this is obviously slightly different.
I know, but.
Yeah. Why is this? Oh, I could actually try. Let me give it another. This is quite annoying. This is gonna be this one. If I would try and remove something from my bin folder, that would actually recycle the application, I guess. No. Huh. Okay. Let's give it one more try. And what I also don't see is my IISExpress, which is not popping up anywhere. it is opened by another program. This is slightly annoying. Huh. All right. So I have a backup plan, obviously, for this, and that is going to be this one. So I'm gonna leave this as it is. This has a bit of code prepared, but I'll go over that so we can at least continue. All right, so this actually has an older project template, so the output is slightly different, but I mean, the services and code is pretty much the same. So let's get back. I had the re-reverser engine here, and in this case, I have used constructor injection, and I'm modifying this input twice, so I have it re-reversed. If I check the program CS file, let's get to this a bit later. What you see here is that I have used strongly typed registrations, and I don't want that at this particular stage. So let me copy this one out and go back to the re-reverser service here. Like this. What I was going to show you is there is one problem in this approach, because this is a string modifier service. This is my re-reverser service, but what we'll get is an error, a runtime error. And it gives you a whole bunch of information, but all the information that you need is in here. What is important here is that some services are not able to be constructed. So, for instance, unable to resolve a service for this particular service while trying to activate this one. Well, what does this mean? I have registered this one, but I am also expecting this service to be injected, but this service was not registered. So that was also what the error means. And in this case, if I want to have this working, the most easy way to do is by going to the program again. And here you saw it. And because nothing has been created here, the order of registration doesn't matter. This one is depending on that one, but it's just a registration. So nothing actually happens here. If I would now save this one and go back to the web page, it will give me another error, and that is the string modifier service is not being resolved. So that means that nothing of this particular type has been registered, or actually this one. And this is something that I did prepare in this demo, but I will try to explain that while going over this code. What you see, let me quickly uncomment this one so I can just close that for you. What you see is that you can only register one service per type. While all these services, the reverser, the uppercase, and the re-reverser, they are all implementing that string modifier services, though I can only get one of them to return on this interface because this whole registration is type-based. If I would do this, for instance, and I would make this like this, what would happen is that eventually the uppercase service will be instantiated while this is being requested. Okay? Because this one, as I mentioned, it's a bit of a dictionary, and it will be overridden with this particular type. Okay? So can we do something about that? Yes, we can, but that requires a bit of different thinking here. The first thing that we need to do is we need to register those services explicitly. So we want this type and we get this type, not interface based. And the next thing that we'll do, if I scroll up, I have created an enumerator with uppercase, reverser, and re-reverser types. And don't worry, this code will be available after this session. What I do now is, let me have a quick check. Yeah, so now what will happen, if I go back to here, I'm going to use another method at the service collection to register something. And what does this do? Well, if you take a good look at this particular generic, it is going to allow me to pass in a modifier enum, and it will return this particular interface. And I haven't told you that, but those methods here have like a whole bunch of overloads. They can have they can have factory patterns to create instances of these objects. They can have like a creation method and so on and so on. And this is what I'm using here. I am passing in the provider, which is the modifier enum, and the key is the result. No, the key is the modifier enum, and it will return any of the services. And what I'm doing here, I say provider.getService of this particular type if I pass in this. So this looks a bit abstract. How does this work in practice? This brings us to the index.html. And in this particular case, I put that code somewhere. Let me have a quick check here. No, that was probably in the home controller. Yeah. I am now using constructor injection here by using this resolver. And this resolver is able to fetch me the uppercase service, the modifier, the reverser service, and the re-reverser service. And in this case, I still have access to all those services, and I can now actually say I want to use the uppercase service in combination with the reverser service. And so this is a bit of a thing that allows you to have the services all implement that interface, but by using that enum, you can actually determine which one you want to have. Though this is not like pure dependency injection, because pure dependency injection would mean give me a drink instead of give me a beer. Yeah, so that's an important difference here. And now if we would run this application, we will actually see that our output is slightly different because the page was obviously slightly different. But here we see that this stuff has been reversed and in uppercase, so I'm still using those two services. All right, well, I think that we are pretty much, that I have shown you pretty much all the stuff that I wanted to show you. I think that we have talked about the parameter, property, eraser. You see, I'm always out of sync with my slides. Yeah. Well, Yeah, excuse me for the little setback on. I don't know why it wouldn't build anymore, but yeah, I hope that it was interesting for you guys and that you learned something and get like a better approach on how to use dependency injection in your own applications. If you have any questions, my contact details are on the slides. The sample project, the last one at least that I ran, is exactly on this URL at GitHub. Just clone it, play around with it, see if you can add extra services and debug it every now and then to see what's going on. And yeah, I hope it was useful for all of you. If there are any questions, not sure. I haven't paid any attention to the chat box.
Nothing new, at least. There were some suggestions on how to access Task Manager and kill the process.
Yeah. You've got my email address. Please send me an email because I am well, apparently I can use Control-Alt-Delete, but that doesn't work because I'm presenting. And I haven't found a way to another way to find it, but
to be honest, I've seen that thing in the past, and I was trying to remember what I did. If it was about WebAssembly, I think it was also the browser's fault that did this thing.
I think it has either something to do with the browser or it has something to do with the hot reload stuff that comes with the new Visual Studio. Yeah, it's either of the two. But anyway, I had this spare project up and running, so yeah. Well, I hope it wasn't too confusing.
Yeah, no, I think there is a question, maybe last minute question.
Yes.
Would you use the dependency injection framework with integration tests?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And there are actually, well, there are several testing tools. There are, for instance, if I do a lot of Blazor development recently, and that involves a lot of dependency injection, and I have been receiving some questions about unit testing with B-unit for Blazor. But what you actually do there, if you want to use dependency injection, because that B unit is like a testing framework, which is like, it's like an isolated process basically. So you have to create the services yourself for the test and then inject them in the constructor yourself basically. You can actually create an instance and just create like this home controller and pass that self-created thing in there as well for testing purposes, obviously. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think totally. Unfortunately, as Gail said, this webinar thing is not very interactive. I promise I will try to correct it next time with I don't know, like a simple meeting, right? This is very annoying. Let's see. I will definitely try. This was a very good advice that I either never tried, to be honest, or I assume that this is impossible because it's just a meeting, right? But yeah.
It's fine. Just for 20 people is good.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, yeah, if there are any unanswered questions or you think later today or tomorrow, like, oh, what was you talking about? Make a screenshot of my contact details and I'll get back to you. No problem.
Yeah, let me push your contact details again in the live event. I think everyone could see that right now, can see that right now.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that is it. And now I think it's Gail time, isn't it? I mean, I will also try to get a photo of the backstage now, ready to go live. Yeah.
What are you?
I think I will publish it in LinkedIn right now. I don't know if we have time for more people to join, but at least I think I just did. So, Gail, I'm sending you live. It's the time for MetaLlama.
Yes,
It's, to be honest, I was expecting for some time to see more details about it. So,
it will not be the day for details.
Yeah.
It is just a teaser.
We can do that one day, can't we?
But we can get details another time. But now I'm just going to take 10 minutes. It's just a teaser to show what we've been working on, because between my last visit to the user group and today, you know what was, COVID, lockdown at home. And so actually with the whole company, we focused on a completely new project that is MetaLlama. It is more than PostSharp. It's meta programming, not only aspect-oriented programming. And MetaLlama, it really does three things. So boilerplate elimination, it is what PostSharp used to do. So that means that we are taking the boilerplate code out of your source code. We generate it at build time, so it doesn't mangle with your source code and so on. So it is still there in MetaLlama, and so now we also have much better than before code architecture validation. I will not show that today because just in 10 minutes I cannot show that. Just now it is there, and we have live templates and code fixes. That means that with MetaLlama you can create custom refactorings, custom code fixes. From DEVEXPRESS, you have tools like CodeRush where there are pre-made refactorings, and with our tool, you can extend it pre-made and make like your own, that quite easily, but actually is both easier and more limited than what you get from refactoring tools or from Visual Studio. And the central concept is still our aspects. There are also fabrics. I don't have time today to go through that, and I will not go through this slide. I will go directly to a very short demo to see the main features, because I would like at the end of this very short demo to show a different approach to dependency injection, something that we have used in a project that we have or on Visual Studio Extension. And for this, switching to Hyper-V and switching to the first step of my demo. So this is an aspect that is done with MetaLlama, and the concept here is that you have a template of a method, and this is a template for logging. So the part that is with the white background, this is your runtime code. This is the code that is going to be injected into the source code, but at build time. And the code that is grayed out with the white, the gray background, you can see here, this code executes at compile time. You see that here, the code executes at compile time. So this whole expression is evaluated at compile time according to the target of the aspect, and the aspect is a custom attribute. So actually, this is a template for logging. I add the template here to the method, and now if I run that, you see that the method is being logged. So what's the magic? So to see the magic, what you can do is you can step into the code, and if you have chosen the magic Llama debug configuration, you will actually debug the transformer code. So actually, you see what's happening there, and Llama debug is a magic configuration that actually tells the debugger to take the transformer code and not the source code. There is another trick I can do. Here I started another build. Yeah, you can see that here I'm stepping into the source code, not the transform code. So I can switch from one to the other very easily. And there is an easier way to look at what's happening with that. and it was supposed to work, but today is the Murphy day, so it's not working. Yes, this is it. I was more lucky than Don. Yeah, and so here you have a diff between the source code and the code that is executed. So you get the idea how we can get the boilerplate code generated by a template generated at compile time, so it doesn't litter your source code. Here is another template with retry. You see, like how can I make a method automatically retry upon exception? Well, I create a template here. I have a for loop, a try loop. Method.proceed means that I invoke the method that is being enhanced or templated. I have the catch. Very simple. If I apply this to a template, you see how I applied this to a method, and you see how the template is applied. And if I run that, you will see actually that this method is invoked 3 times, even if in the source code you will see it invoked a single time. So you get the idea. Templates can be very complex. You can have a lot of compile time logic. You see it is all well-defined, strongly typed. That's nice. And also templates can introduce things. So not only change current code and apply a template to business code, but also introduce new declarations. For instance, here you can see that the template added a GUID or an ID property. So that's about the idea of like applying templates. Now, when you have templates, you can actually do dependency injection differently, because the way that it is done by the container is that it uses reflection at runtime, or like it emits code dynamically to inject dependencies. So we can do things differently by doing this at compile time, for instance, and I will give you an example. And this example is a bit contrived because it is only done as an excuse for me to have get the opportunity to show you MetaLama, frankly. But we are using this approach, much more complex, but this approach, we are using that in our own, the source code of our own Visual Studio extension. So the approach is that we are going to have an inject custom attribute, just like in ASP.NET core dependency injection, but this attribute is going to be a template. And what this template is going to do is actually to replace the field by a property of the same name. And the first time that it is invoked, okay, the first time that it is invoked, if the dependency has not been retrieved yet, we are going to call a service provider. And we are going to assign the source to the underlying property, so that the next time that this property is invoked, we don't have to go back to the service provider. So here, what we are going, like what we are doing here is to mix a service locator pattern, which was advertised as being an anti-pattern. I don't see a reason why it would be an anti-pattern here, because now we have like async context, async local properties that follow the context of execution. So really, this is a viable pattern. So it combines the service locator and aspect-oriented programming, so a template. So, and the nice thing here is that actually you don't have the problem of the service locator because it is not in your source code. You don't have a reference to your service locator in your source code. You only have the reference in your template, and it is very simple to change. So this template is a bit more complex because these samples are not for demo, but more complex samples. But here you can see this is the template for the property. So this is how we are changing the property. First, we are getting the property value. And if it is null, we call the service provider with the type of the field of property of the target property. And then we are setting the target property to the new service, and eventually we return it. So this template is a bit more cryptic than the first template. You know, hello world. The first 3 examples were very simple. This is more difficult, but you can do that. And this is how I introduced the service provider field. And well, that's what I wanted to show. Here we have still building. We have another implementation. The reason that we use this approach in our Visual Studio source code is that when you are writing code for Visual Studio using Visual Studio SDK, you have three dependency containers, 3 dependency injection frameworks, and a single object can consume dependencies from 3 frameworks. So actually, you cannot have just that. The instantiation of your object cannot be completely under control of the dependency injection framework because there are 3. So this is how we resolve that problem. And actually, that's all I wanted to show you today. The next step, if you're interested, is to what are the next step? Actually, let's go back to what you can do today. No, I don't have the slides for that. But what you can do today, you can go to the website. So you Tosharp MetaLlama, you can download the examples. There is a nice website, try.metallama.net, and you can try things without installing that on your computer. There is documentation, everything is online, and I can join for a user group meeting in person or remotely.
I would very much like that. To be honest, let's try and share at least the base URL where people can find more information. But this is very, very interesting. I had the chance of seeing it a bit in actions with your online samples. I know that it can protect from architectural erosion, with even preventing something to be out there, to be built and be out there, right? So I think there is a tremendous opportunity here, and to have a real meetup, to have an event that we can get a step deeper, right, from the beginning to the end of how we can get some help there, both for the boilerplate code that we can get out of our way, but also for architectural erosion. I think that's the last one is the most important one, especially when you are in cloud. You definitely don't want that because it might skyrocket your costs, right? So this is a great opportunity, I think. Feel free whenever we can discuss it later, of course. Whenever there is time, we can definitely create an event.
Thank you. I will get in touch. But so the status now is that this is in preview. It's in preview, so I guess it's going to be still in preview a couple of months. And then we are going to launch that. So currently there is no way to buy this. It's completely free. Then there is going to be a free edition, MetaLlama Essentials, and a paying edition. And we are going to. I will get in touch for a full presentation if the audience is interested.
Sure. And people can use it in some kind of a preview mode, and they can feedback to you what's happening and if there is any bug or anything.
Exactly. We have a Slack channel where people can chat directly with me or my colleagues. Yeah.
Perfect.
It's all on the website, postsharp.net/metalama. I'm super curious of feedback because it's really, well, it was a year and a half non-stop coding, like several people, but I don't code like, it has been a long time I haven't coded non-stop 1 year and a half. It was always like I code 2 months, then I do support during 5 years.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, that's the big new thing.
Yeah, and I really enjoy the name and the logo. Actually, it kind of stacks in your mind, right? It's very nice.
That's what I hope. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Gail, for that. We will, of course, talk offline to arrange something for the near future. That would be my pleasure. Yeah, I think that is it for tonight, right? Isn't
Good.
it? I will put you live with this thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I really liked the event today. Thank you, Gail. Thank you, Don. I hope that we will have another event soon enough. And thank you all for attending. If you want anything, you can reach out from the meetup.com platform. And the next days, I need to crop a bit the beginning. We started the event a bit earlier. In the next days, I will also publish it on YouTube, and I will add the link in the meetup.com platform. So
good. Thank you for this event, George. Thank you, Don.
Yes,
see you later.
You too.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Ciao. Bye.